Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. Today we will be starting off with verse 75 of Surah Al-Nisa. We have covered 74 verses of Surah Al-Nisa, and we have seen how the hypocrites especially have been dealt with in this surah. Earlier on, of course, in the very beginning, certain directives regarding edibles and regarding the fact that the religion has been completed. The famous verse, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, has already announced that this is the final stage. And now that these people of the book, they are trying to make fun of the Prophet at times, that this making fun of is actually in a very subtle way, that they would induce the hypocrites and they would back them, and that they should go and create certain consternations. For example, they would tell them that they can greet the Prophet in a way that would disparage them, and all these pranks they would play through the agencies of these hypocrites. But slowly and surely they were being exposed, and within this context we come to the 75th verse of the surah, which says, وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ الظَّالِمِ أَهْلُهَا وَاجْعَلْ لَنَا مِن لَّدُنْكَ وَلِيًّا وَاجْعَلْ لَنَا مِن لَّدُنْكَ نَصِيرًا. Believers, what has come over you that you fight not in the cause of God? And for those hopeless men, women and children who are crying out, Lord, rescue us from the city whose people are oppressors, and raise for us from yourself one who will sympathize, and raise for us from yourself one who will bring help. So you can see that it is evident from this very verse that the foremost as well as the most prominent form of war for the cause of God, or that we can call as qital fi sabilillah, is to help people who are being tormented because of their religion. So if you see, the words are wal mustazafina min ar-rijal wan nisa wal wildan, people who are weak and helpless, and from amongst men, women and children, and they would like to be helped, and Rabbana akhrijna min hazihi al-qaryati al-zalimi ahluha, that they would like to be expelled and taken out from the city whose people who are living there, they are oppressors. By the word city of the oppressors, of course the reference is to the settlements where many men, women and children had embraced faith, but were still in the clutches of their guardians and power lords, and as such were unable to lead a life according to their religion without becoming a target of their oppression and cruelty. So therefore, now if we also take stock of this verse, we can understand that even today this verse is it has a very strong message for us, and that is, anywhere in the world, if Muslims are under oppression and persecution, and the rulers are persecuting them, which means that they are not allowing them to practice religion freely, then other countries can interfere, of course, first diplomatically. Obviously, most of the countries are also signatories of the UN Charter, in which you cannot wage war, you cannot wage aggression. But come what may, if this happens, that there is a country in which such oppression is let loose and persecution is also found there, then first of all, diplomatic ties and this UN Charter will be used to pressurize them to give up this oppression and this persecution. But if every effort fails, then this is the only form of qital or war that has been allowed by religion, in which the purpose is to help the oppressed against the oppressors. Other forms of jihad, of course, there is just one other major form of jihad, and that was basically a punishment that was carried out in the times of Prophet Muhammad against people who had intentionally denied the truth. That is something specific to the era of messengers of God. I have repeatedly explained this here, that in the prophetic era, there are certain norms and there are certain laws that only apply in that era, and they cannot be extended. So the punishment that was given in the times of Prophet Lot, Prophet Noah, Prophets Hud and Saleh, respectively, against their nations who had denied the truth, was in the form of cyclones and tempests and these physical calamities. But in the times of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, this scourge took place, or was taken or granted to be taken place through the hands of the believers. So they became the instruments of justice of God himself. And when people denied the truth, denied the midday sun, in fact, then it was They were punished for this, and this punishment is going to continue for them in the hereafter as well. But this is a specific law meant for the eras of messengers of God only. And in their own era as well, particularly in the era of Prophet Muhammad, we can also say that another war that was waged was against oppression and against and persecution. So these two wars, one against persecution and oppression, and the other against people who had deliberately denied the truth. These are the two wars that the Prophet fought. But obviously, one of these wars, which means against deniers of the truth, is something that was specific to his era. The other war, which is against persecution and against oppression, that is something whose directive is still operational. But again, it has a lot of conditions. First of all, it is important to realize that no group, organization, or group of people cannot wage war. Jihad cannot be waged. It has to be waged by a properly organized government in by a country. So it is a directive that is to be given by the collectivity. And the secondly, most importantly, is that in this regard, you have to understand that this should not be a suicide mission. There should be a fair chance of winning. Otherwise, if you are not able to help people, even militarily, then should not do that. So these are some of the conditions that have to be understood, and at the same time realize that unless they are fulfilled, no such effort must be undertaken. In particular, in today's times when we are bound in a lot of treaties and charters, so they have to be first revoked if any step has to be taken. And before that step even should be taken, then, as I said earlier on, diplomatic pressure, diplomatic ties, and other pressures can be exerted so that this oppression could be curbed. One thing that you might need to note in this verse is the use of the words milladunka. So milladunka, of course, they express that the fact that though apparently there is no ray of hope, nothing is beyond God. So milladunka means from yourself. So the people who are praying is that we don't find any hope, but you from yourself, you can do whatever you want. And therefore we trust you, and we would like to follow and obviously pin our hopes on you. So if we look at this verse in a very comprehensive way, we can see that the cruel disbelievers had made life so miserable for the Muslims on their native soil that their very homeland became a place of great hardship for them. And in spite of the fact that love for the homeland is a natural thing, they had become so repulsed by it that they called it the city of oppressors and would not even tolerate to be ascribed it in any other way. So it was called the city of oppressors, their own homeland called their own place, and they wanted themselves to be taken out of that city. Also, a homeland remains a homeland for the believers as long as there is peace for their religion and faith in it. If this is not the case, then such a place is not a homeland. It is a place of savage beasts, the dwelling place of snakes and the abode of devils. All this is something which is very evident. One more thing that is evident from this verse is that such was the hopelessness that prevailed in those times that the oppressed Muslims were not able to see a way out of their hardship. They were relying solely on the help and support of God, that He may open up a way for them, irrespective of the apparent means and resources. So in spite of these circumstances, Muslims stood their ground with resolve and determination. And what happened actually is something that we know from history, how the Almighty did help them and support them. So if somewhere today Muslims are oppressed in this manner, as I said, then jihad will become obligatory or mandatory on other Muslims if they are in a position to wage it and they have fulfilled all its conditions. And then the next verse says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ الطَّاغُوتِ فَقَاتِلُوا أَوْلِيَاءَ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. Tell them, O Prophet, that believers fight in the cause of God and disbelievers fight in the cause of their rebellious people. So a taghut here is referring to the leaders of these disbelievers in Arabia, and they are called taghut. And then it is said, فَقَاتِلُوا أَوْلِيَاءَ الشَّيْطَانِ. They are friends of Satan. So fight you against these friends of Satan, and rest assured, because very feeble is the plot of Satan. So when people fight for the cause of God, they should not in any way feel that they have been left out, or at least God is not going to support them. They will be supported by the Almighty. And at these instances, it is the most important thing to have one's eye and one's faith fully lit up that if they are in a spot of bother, if they are in this situation, then they must not despair, they must not lose hope, because as the verse says, inna kayda shaitani kana dha'ifa, which means that the plot of Satan, rest assured, is very feeble. So after witnessing the helplessness and cruelty faced by people living in the lands of disbelievers, people would be induced to wage war, and they would mention this sentiment of theirs to the Prophet. And at these instances, of course, we know that, as we shall see in the forthcoming verse, that when people would be seen in such an oppressed way, the hypocrites would actually come forward to the Prophet and say that, well, let's go and fight these people who are oppressing them. But when the time of that fight would come, or that war would come, they would just evade them. So it's like claiming a lot from their own tongues, but when the time comes for action, they just back away. And this is what is mentioned in the very next verse, when it is said, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ قِيلَ لَهُمْ كُفُّوا أَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ فَلَمَّا كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقِتَالُ إِذَا فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَخْشَوْنَ النَّاسَ كَخَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ أَوْ أَشَدَّ خَشْيَةً وَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا لِمَا كَتَبْتَ عَلَيْنَا الْقِتَالَ لَوْلَا أَخَّرْتَنَا إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ قَرِيبٍ قُلْ مَتَاعُ الدُّنْيَا قَلِيلٌ وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لِمَنِ اتَّقَىٰ وَلَا تُظْلَمُونَ فَتِيلًا. Have you not seen those who, when they were told, the time to wage war has not come as yet, so withhold your hands, adhere to the prayer, and pay zakat? So these are the people that we were just referring to. They are the hypocrites. So when they would see that the time of war has not yet arrived, they would actually present this wish before the Prophet, well, that we are ready to fight. But when the actual time of war would be declared, they would just run away, as we have just seen. So they would evade the prayer and the zakah and show impatience to wage war. When they were told to just withhold yourselves, don't wage war, just pray and pay zakah, because the time of war has not yet come, they would insist that they are ready for that. However, when war was made obligatory upon them, their situation now is that one group from among them fears people the way God should be feared, or even more. They say, Lord, why have you made this war obligatory upon us? Why did you not give us some more respite? Tell them, very little is the provision of life, and for those who adhere to piety, the hereafter is much better for them, and there you shall not face injustice the slightest. So you see, this was a very common ploy that was adopted by the hypocrites, and especially they would make this claim when they knew that the time of battle had not arrived. They would say that they are prepared for battle, but when the time would actually arrive, they would just say that they feel very, very scared of what's going on, and they would not like to go ahead. And that is something that we have to understand. One thing that you might need to note here is this sentence which says, وَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا لِمَا كَتَبْتَ عَلَيْنَا الْقِتَالَ, and they said that, oh God, why have you made war mandatory upon us? So just a small thing that you might need to note, that the word qalu, which means say, it's not always the expression of the tongue for which you say the word qala. It actually also depicts what you say in your heart or your mental state. And this is also very common in our own language and the Arabic language and many other languages, when what we say in our heart or what we think in our mind is also expressed as a conversation or a statement. أينما تكونوا يدرككم الموت ولو كنتم في بروج مشيدة. As for death, wherever you are, it is bound to come to you in all circumstances, even if you are in strong and towering fortresses. So that is what is being told to them, that they have been scared to death, they don't go out to fight, and they think that they should just remain the way they are, and other people should go out and fight. So it is to them that it is being said, when the time of death comes, it's going to overcome you wherever you are, as it is said, وَلَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُرُوجٍ مُشَيَّدَةٍ. Even if you are in a strong and a towering fortress, if you're in a castle, in a fortress, if you hide there, but the time of your death has arrived, then you cannot stop that to happen, because this is what is going to be your destiny. And then it is said, وَإِن تُصِبْهُمْ حَسَنَةٌ يَقُولُوا هَذِهِ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ وَإِن تُصِبْهُمْ سَيِّئَةٌ يَقُولُوا هَذِهِ مِنْ عِنْدِكَ قُلْ كُلٌّ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ فَمَا لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ حَدِيثًا. So These people accept your prophethood by their tongue, and if they are blessed with some success, they say, this is from God. And if they are inflicted with loss, they say, it is because of you. So it is like the very shallow claim they make of the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad. They would express faith with him, but whenever something bad or some problem would arise, they would blame the Prophet and say that this is because of you that it has happened. Now, in reply, the Quran says, Kul kullum min indillah, say everything is from God, because whatever happens because of His permission. So it says, فَمَا لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ حَدِيثًا. So what has come over these people that they are not prepared to understand anything? And then it is said, مَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ حَسَنَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ وَمَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ سَيِّئَةٍ فَمِنْ نَفْسِكَ. It is a fact that whatever good befalls you is from God's grace, and whatever ill befalls you is from your own self. So the answer that has been extended here is that whatever good befalls you is because of God, and whatever ill befalls you is because a person himself shows cowardness, because of his own weakness or some mistake. And that is why something, when evil befalls you or some wrong thing befalls you, it is because of your own fault, that you have done something bad, or because you have made a mistake, or you might have some weakness within yourself, so that the Almighty wants to bring to surface that weakness, and so that you get to know where you are falling short. So we know that this is something that has to be understood, that whatever befalls us is a directive of God. If He has destined something, then of course it is our destiny. But before it happens, we have to make the best effort. We have to put in the best effort, and that is what is derived from this very important directive. مَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ حَسَنَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ وَمَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ سَيِّئَةٍ فَمِنْ نَفْسِكَ. It is a fact that whatever good befalls you is from God's grace, and whatever ill befalls you is from your own self. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ لِلنَّاسِ رَسُولًا. Their real ailment is that they are hesitant about your prophethood. Ignore them. We have sent you forth as a messenger for people, and for this God's evidence is sufficient. For this God's efficient is sufficient. So again, they are being told that the reason that the Prophet has been sent is that he should be obeyed. And the thing that they are doing is that they just express their faith in him orally, but when the time comes of their own test and some calamity befalls them, instead of considering it to be a trial and a test, they think that it is because of the misplanning of the Prophet himself. And they are being told that this is not the right way, because prophets are not meant in this to be dealt with in such a way. They have been sent by the Almighty for a very specific purpose, and that is they are envoys of God, they are messengers of God, and they do not falter in conveying God's message. مَنْ يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ. So then it is said that they should know that he who obeys the messenger in fact obeyed God. مَنْ يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ وَمَنْ تَوَلَّى فَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ عَلَيْهِمْ حَفِيظًا. And he who turned away, you are not responsible for him, because we have not sent you to be their guardian. So the Prophet is assured here, actually, he's given this assurance that if people are turning away from you, then you are not one who's going to force them back. It's not your job to do that. If they are doing something against their own conscience and against their own inner conviction, then they themselves have to be blamed. It's not you two who are to be blamed. فَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ عَلَيْهِمْ حَفِيظًا. You have not been sent as a keeper or as a guardian over them. وَيَقُولُونَ طَاعَةً فَإِذَا بَرَزُوا مِنْ عِنْدِكَ بَيَّتَ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ غَيْرَ الَّذِي تَقُولُ وَاللَّهُ يَكْتُبُ مَا يُبَيِّتُونَ فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. They say, we obey you, but as soon as they leave your presence, a group from among them confers to do totally otherwise. God is writing down all these whisperings of theirs. So ignore them and put your trust in God, and know that enough is God to trust. Once again, وَيَقُولُونَ طَاعَةً, of course, the actual word is ta', which means that the khabar or the enunciative whose inchoative is suppressed here. The mubtada is suppressed here so that all the attention could be emphasized on the word ta'. So it is said that such is their nature, that they would be very, very sweet-tongued when they are in the presence of the Prophet. When they meet their own people, then they have an entirely different outlook. So they do not say the same words, and then God Almighty warns them that whatever you are doing is now being noted down. So remember, this is going to really cost you. And then it is said that why are these people so hesitant about your prophethood? Remember, these hypocrites are being discussed, and they show this lack of trust, at least inwardly, although outwardly they do express as if they are very strong and urgent and ardent advocates of his prophethood. And then it is said, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Do these people not ponder on the Quran? Had it been from someone other than God, they would have found in it many contradictions. Many contradictions. So the thing which is very important to note here is that as far as the Quran is concerned, this is one of the biggest challenges that it has presented before people, that it is the Word of God. It is the Word of God. And how so? Because it does not have any contradiction. Human books, human discourses, human speeches, human conversations, everything which is authored by human beings is plagued by this evolution in which people start off their lives, in which they begin with a certain belief, they express it, and then they revise it, and they then go on and say whatever they said before, they actually negate it and they form a new opinion. So it's like a life in which you gradually reach a final point, and then again that final point is never final. So the implication is that if they had reflected on the Quran, they would never have been doubtful about Prophet Muhammad's prophethood. This is because it is not possible that for years a person should give speeches on a variety of topics in different situations and circumstances, and when these speeches are compiled from the beginning to the end, they form such a harmonious and congruous whole that it has no contradiction of views and does not reflect any effects of mood change of the speaker, and also does not depict any revision or change of views. Only the Quran has this characteristic. It is free from any evolution, from any discrepancy. And in the 23 years of its revelation, whatever it said on day one, it actually adhered to it right near the end, which means there was no evolution, there was no change. And this is something which every human being is plagued with. So sound and well knit is every idea of the Quran, both in its principle and in the corollaries of these principles, that one can say that even the formulae of arithmetic and geometry are not as sound and as well knitted. And so connected and linked are the beliefs it teaches, that if any one of these beliefs is removed, the whole chain and sequence falls apart. So it's like a bouquet of flowers in which every flower has its place. The rituals of worship and other directives it gives spring from beliefs such as branches spring from a stem. And the system of life which comes into existence as a result of this overall teaching is like of a lead cemented wall in which each and every brick is attached and placed in such a way that it cannot be separated from the other. And if it is, then there would be a gap, a yawning gap, that would actually left the whole structure vulnerable. So this is a very important verse of the Quran, and it actually presents its proof that of being of divine origin. Had it been of any human origin, there would have been several discrepancies, contradictions, and evolution of thought in the Quran. So before I move forward, I'm going to pause here, and if you have any questions regarding what we have studied up till now, please raise them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our first question comes from Imran. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you very much for a very good explanation. I've got a quick question. When Quran talks about that, whatever human beings do is because of what they had sent forward or because of what their hands have brought. But then why are only some people afflicted with calamities when we see right now the whole ummah is engaged in wrongdoing? That's one first part of my question. The second is the most recent explanation which you gave about no contradiction in Quran, no holes in there. Is there any book that you think we can refer to which also can help non-Muslims or non-believers, where they can read and understand, because we of course believe in it, but they always look at it from a very controversial objection.
Yes, I think as far as your second question is concerned, so there has been work done by many Muslim scholars, and the way to approach this would be, I think, it's very convincing for non-Muslims, is if you present that work, which actually talks about the contradictions that non-Muslims have raised against the Quran, and then scholars from the Muslim side have tried to answer those objections and shown that the contradictions or the discrepancies that they are talking about are simply because they have not understood the language or the context or some other parallel verses. So I can at least refer you to one of them, and this is by one of our colleagues at Al-Mawrid. His name is Amjad, and so he has answered these objections and these criticisms on the Quran. I think it's on his website, which is called Understanding Islam. So if you just can Google it, you'll come up with the site, and on one section of that site, these are a number of objections which non-Muslims have raised and said that, well, the challenge of the Quran is that it is without discrepancy, and look here, we have found this and this and this discrepancy. So Amjad has answered on his on this website. He no longer is available on that website, but you'll find these articles that he has written, and there are many of them. I think, to the best of my memory, there are more than 30 or 35 of them present there, in which every discrepancy or objection has been taken separately and answered. And I forgot your first question.
Yeah, that was about when it says that ma asabaka min hasana fa min Allah, ma asabaka min sayyi'a fa min nafsik, that whatever you musiba or affliction that comes upon you because of your own hands or your actions. But why is that only a small subset of the ummah is afflicted, whereas we see many other countries or people are engaged?
Here, affliction is meant that any weakness of strategy that you might have adopted. It is a particular context of this verse. It's not a general verse. It's talking about the fact that if you are afflicted with a reversal in a battle, or you face something like this, then don't blame the Prophet. It could be because of your own weakness, or because the Almighty wants to bring to the fore the weakness that you have inside, and He would like you to have it diagnosed and have it corrected. Other than that, inflicting trials, and remember, these trials are not just in the negative sense that you are put through calamities and adversities. Even happiness and affluence is a form of trial. So trials are of both sorts. I mean, when you are very affluent, when you are very successful, you have a success story to tell, you tend to forget God, and hence that trial is working. Similarly, when you are deprived of things, or when you are afflicted with things, that also is a form of trial. So trial is something that is a very broad thing. And so it's not just, as I said, calamities or adversities that can be called a trial.
Thank you. Sir, the points that you were just discussing about if a person is not thinking on himself, whether he is strategic in his actions, then it's his fault, right? But what about the people who have less resources, or maybe they have less IQs with them? So is that also their fault because they are born in that specific context, or they are born with some low IQ?
So, this is not what the Quran is referring to. It is actually referring to moral weaknesses. The weaknesses that we are referring here are not any intellectual weaknesses, but moral weaknesses. For example, the weaknesses that you have in character. For example, cowardice. We know in the Battle of Uhud, it was this cowardice of certain people who were sitting in a group, and they were told not to leave that vantage position even if they see the battle being won. But they left that position because they thought that it will gather as much spoils of war as was possible. So they showed this greed. So basically, what is being said here is that if any calamity befalls you, it is because of any moral weakness that is found in you, and God wants to expose that so that you can detect it and have it corrected. And this moral weaknesses is regardless of any IQ.
So, sir, this entire verse is specific to Prophet's time, or it's applicable to?
It's applicable even today. I mean, you see, even today it is something that when something befalls us in the negative sense, then, and the best thing that we need to do is soul searching. that maybe that our own, I'm not talking about the strategy that we chalk out as a general scheme, but I'm talking about any moral weakness that we might have had that might have produced this negative result. Maybe we were greedy, maybe we were too lazy, maybe we were too hesitant, maybe we were too rash. So see, all these things are human attitudes, and some of them become weaknesses in the moral sense, and some of them become personality weaknesses, and they don't have anything to do with your IQ. All that they need is self-analysis. I mean, you just need to understand how and where you went wrong. And also, I can also say this, that at times a person himself or herself might not be able to diagnose. So hence the reason to discuss. At times you might not be able to get to the bottom of what went wrong yourself. So you can always confer with friends and with confidants and ask for their opinion. So basically what is being said here is, its failure is not because of the fact that in this particular situation, that it was the Prophet who adopted a wrong strategy. It is because God wanted to expose them and expose their weaknesses that has happened. So this verse in that context is very specific. But as I said, other than that, because there are other verses, and a part of this verse also can be made to understand. You can make it understand in the sense that at times these weaknesses are moral in nature, and God wants us to correct them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Related to that same verse, people are asking, so Allah wouldn't give us a trial which we can't overcome due to intellectual deficiencies, and also because the ayah is generally used very loosely, how do you blame children or
I think this verse is not the one that is being used in a very loose sense. There is another verse in the Quran which might sound, because of the meaning, it's very similar, but it is slightly different in its structure. It says, وَمَا أَصَابَكَ بِمُصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ, that whatever calamity befalls you, it is because of your own doing, what you have done. بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ. So I think the question is actually directed towards that verse, and that is found in the 42nd surah of the Quran, which is Surah Shura. And in answer to this, because we've discussed this elsewhere also, and I've tried to explain this, that this is particularly addressed to the prophetic, to the nation of the Prophet, who were the Quraysh, the Bani Ismail. So about them, it was destiny that whatever they would do, they would be punished because of what they have done in this world. So for them, it was given that if they would do wrong, in spite of knowing that they have done wrong, then their punishment would be meted out to them in this world. So that is a particular and a very specific area, that for the Bani Ismail or the Quraysh, if they would do wrong and that wrongdoing would be made evident to them, and they would still adhere to it and not realize that they have done something wrong, in spite of knowing that they have done something wrong, they would not mend their ways, then God says that as a punishment of what you have done, we will punish you in this world. But for the rest of us living in the post-prophetic era, this does not apply. I mean, it's not because of our own wrongdoing necessarily that we are being punished. Yes, this could be one of the reasons, but there are other reasons as well. So we have to make this distinction also, that in the prophetic era, a wrongdoing was punished because that wrongdoing was something about which God says that it was done deliberately, done knowingly, and done in the presence of a prophet of God who had made things clear to them. But in the post-prophetic period, this law does not apply. So the general law in the post-prophetic period is that at times we are punished because of our own wrongdoings. Yes, this could be a possibility. At times this punishment or this trial is because of, the punishment that we think we are undergoing is a form of a trial. For example, a famine, for example, children who are born handicapped, or all sorts of adversities that we face. These could be forms of a trial. And then thirdly also, the trials come in this post-prophetic era in order to make us more cognizant of God, because when we find ourselves being drawn away from God, these trials and these tribulations make us remember God more. And then fourthly, another reason of these trials and tribulations or these adversities is that they tend to make us stronger than before, because when we pass through a trial and we show resilience in combating it, so when we come out of it, we are stronger, internally stronger than before. So you see, these are the general reasons, I would say, or benefits of those trials in the post-prophetic era. But the verse that is being said is in the mind of the questioner, I think, and partly maybe also in the person who just asked this previous question also, is the one that is found elsewhere in the Quran, in which it is specifically said that whatever evil whatever evil befalls you is because of your own wrongdoing. So the word your here is not me or anyone else in the post-prophetic era. The word your here is referring to the Bani Ismail.
Thank you very much. Could you please comment on the intellectual deficiencies part?
So you see, intellectual deficiencies never ever become a source of, God rewarding or punishing you. I mean, everyone is going to be rewarded or punishment on the basis of the moral choices he or she makes. The moral choices, not any intellectual choice. I mean, a person could be as intelligent as Einstein, and he could be as dumb as any person that you can imagine. But you see, as far as the awareness of good and evil is concerned, God says that this is equally found in all human beings. It's regardless of your intellect. The fact that you have conscience. Every person has been given a conscience. The most intelligent people have a conscience, and the dumbest of people would have a conscience. So it's a matter and a question of acting according to your conscience. So that has to be understood, that conscience is never weak. Conscience is never, you cannot say a person is super conscientious. Yes, there are people who are very conscientious, but there are other people whose conscience has just gone to sleep. And that itself is a form of punishment, that when you stop using your conscience, when you stop paying heed to the voices of your conscience, then as a punishment, God actually weakens your conscience from within. So intellectual deficiency, I would say, has a lot to do with your worldly achievements or the placement in your society, but it has no place before the Almighty, because He's not going to judge you on the basis of your intellect.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Dr. Saleem. Ammar Rasul, please go ahead.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab.
Walaikum.
Dr. Sahab, I wanted to very quickly ask about this verse that you discussed today, where the verse talks about the responsibility on Muslim nations or countries to reach out and help
People in
a
oppression.
Muslim population
Yeah.
which is under subjugation and is facing zulm. And so in today's context, we see that Muslim countries are just basically looking the other way, and there is mere lip service, if that. And in fact, some Muslim countries are having business deals with the oppressors. And so my first part of the question is, are we what is expected from God or from Muslim nations in this day and age? That's my first part of the question. And secondly, we always maintain that Islam does not have a central religious body, for example, like a pope exists in Christianity. Do you think that now at this juncture, a pope might have been useful in Islam, where a religious figure might have come up and said, well, this is what Muslim nations are expected to do because there are so many divisions?
The thing is, regarding your second question, because you see, unless someone is infallible, how would you know that the decision that he has given is absolutely correct? So only a prophet could have been the pope in the sense that you have said. Even the popes that the Christianity believes in, they are, given this status because they are given this divine status, and the belief about them is that they are divinely inspired. God is behind them, and the decision that they give is actually like coming from God. So you see, unless there is a person like that who has such a stature that any verdict that he would give would be absolutely fault free, no one would actually follow him, unless he would be a superhuman, because all humans are bound to falter, and this position could only have been enjoyed by the Prophet himself. And after the Prophet, this has been delegated to the Quran. So in our understanding, it was the Prophet and the Quran who occupied this authority, and that is what God wanted us to do. He could not have appointed any single person, because then there must have been a succession, because one pope would have died or whatever authority, and then he would have to be replaced by another. So because human beings can make a wrong decision, so this would have been very grave for anything to have happened, that to give the command of a single person, to a final say to a single person, about whom we know that a wrong decision could have easily be taken by such a person. So therefore, I think that in the well-being of the masses, this was never adopted. Again, I've forgotten your first question.
So my first question is that since there is a clear Quranic edict that Muslim nations are they're obligated.
Yes, I remember. Okay, yes. You see, as far as this, the fact is concerned that if there is oppression going on anywhere in the world and there is any persecution being going on in the world, so this is the only pretext on the basis of which militancy or armed jihad can be waged. But before that even happens, we have to see the situation of the rest of the Muslim countries and of the persecution that is happening itself. I mean, at times it is because of their own militancy, the internal militancy in that nation that has provoked some other people, and now there is a constant war, or like a in-house war that is going on. So that is something in which, first of all, you have to understand that Islam in no case condones any war, any people fighting amongst each other unless they have state authority. Only a state has the authority to fight. And secondly, non-combatants, people who just cannot fight, they cannot be harmed in any way. So I see this not being carried out or being honored in many Muslim countries in which this oppression is taking place. This oppression in many Muslim countries has arisen, I would say, because of internal conflicts, internal wars, and in those wars and internal conflicts, this very important statute in which you must not harm people who are not fighting, like women, children, and other men who are not combatants. I don't find this to be the case. So if this is the case, then obviously the next step would be that the rest of the Muslim countries should see that there is a civil population who is under siege, under attack, persecuted and oppressed. And so the next step would be that the world should create a pressure as much as possible. And if that is not possible, then at least the Muslim bloc should unite, which of course in today's world we don't see it happening that way, because every Muslim country has its own interest. We don't have a united Muslim bloc. And thirdly, of course, if there had been such a Muslim bloc, then that moral pressure, if created, if it had not worked, then of course the chance of any war, if the war was to be fought in a way that we would know that we could win that war, only then should have it been undertaken. But in the presence of so many other countries, the interests of so many other countries in a single country, because a single country is not alone, as we all know. They are all backed by world forces. So you see, there is a very complex scenario at the moment. And in that complex scenario, at least we should be in a position to understand that peace can only be restored in at least a Muslim country, or Muslims living in a non-Muslim country, when Muslims themselves are peaceful and not harming the non-Muslim population in any malicious way.
Well, this is a long discussion, but I thank Dr. Saab for the answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I had a question regarding your answer. So you mentioned like Muslims cannot hurt other non-combatants, right? But the way our modern warfare works, like even if a Muslim state is on board with going on war with, say, an oppressor, the way modern warfare works is like there's no way you can't hurt non-combatants with the way they design their weapons.
So exactly that is the point, that weapons of mass scale killing, of mass destruction, like for example bombs, hydrogen bombs, atom bombs, they are absolutely something that we should not be using. I mean, even as a deterrent, because even deterrents are meant for the sake that you would use them if the situation arises. So weapons of mass destruction, I think they have to be abstained from, because we know that from these weapons you're not just kill the army of your warring country, but also innocent civilians, and maybe much more civilians than the army itself. So I am personally not in favor of any weapon of mass destruction.
Then how could you win a war to begin with?
By of course being in a position to, first of all, you should have the military might. I mean, you have your own military might, your own martial ammunition should be such that you are able to dislodge the enemy, and the enemy, of course, here is the advancing enemy, the advancing army which is at war with you. And there are weapons that can do that. You have missiles, we have other things that are pointedly directed, or drones which are pointedly directed to the army which is advancing. So if you you might misfire and miscalculate. That's another thing. But these are very pointed and very, very highly sophisticated. We know, I'm not going to name the person. Very recently, a very prominent leader was killed by a drone attack, and such was the precision that thousands and thousands of miles away, they could monitor that person. They knew where he was. He was in a house, in a cave, or whatever, and they sent that drone, and that single person was just killed. So, in the presence of such highly precise warring ammunition being available, I think that is very much possible that you confine yourself to the person, to the people who are fighting.
Thank you very much for that answer, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, how much of our Ummah's situation can be attributed to the fall of the Khilafat after that Muslim countries have been divided and were dependent on rich nations?
So I think that we have to understand that the Khilafat, or the fact that all Muslim nations should come under one banner or one flag, is not a directive of Islam at all. This happened naturally, that the monarchy right after, the Umayyads and the Abbasids, it continued, and it went on for so many centuries, and right up to 1924. But it's not something that was the some directive of Islam that all the Muslim countries should unite in the form of a Muslim bloc. So even if this had been in a situation that you would have independent Muslim countries all over the world, that is equally good. So I think what needs to be understood is that physical proximity or physically having a Muslim bloc is not as important as having a Muslim bloc, at least in a forum in which your interests are discussed, and these common interests are and looked after. So it's not essential to be governed by a single person. The whole Muslim empire, even if they are independent countries, that is fine. But what should be, what is the need of the hour is the collaboration between the leaders of the Muslim countries. And that's the only thing. Otherwise, the downfall of the caliphate, or what the caliphate did, if I start recounting to you the oppression that they perpetrated, they did something very horrific. The Ottomans, if you look at their history, the Abbasids, if you look at their history, so they curbed rebellions, the way they curbed them, the way they fought with their enemies, the way they extended their empires. On the one hand, yes, there were some golden periods, but on the other hand, there were horrific tales of carnage as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Now that this was it for all the questions, so I think we can move on now.
Okay, so let's move on. This is now verse 83. وَإِذَا جَاءَهُمْ أَمْرٌ مِّنَ الْأَمْنِ أَوِ الْخَوْفِ أَذَاعُوا بِهِ وَلَوْ رُدُّوهُ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ وَإِلَى أُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْهُمْ لَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنبِطُونَهُ مِنْهُمْ وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ لَاتَّبَعْتُمُ الشَّيْطَانَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Believers, they are not your well-wishers. So again, the direction of address is towards these hypocrites who had infiltrated in the ranks of the Muslims. So believers, they are not your well-wishers. So when they hear any news of peace or danger, they spread it. Whereas if they had reported it to the messenger of God and to those among them who have been made in charge of matters, then those who have the ability to reach the core of an issue would have understood it. But they have adopted the path of Satan. And had God's grace and mercy not been upon you, all but a few of you would have followed Satan. So it actually is another instance. This is a description of another instance in which these hypocrites would spread rumors, and they would, instead of verifying these rumors, as this verse says, by referring them back to the Prophet and those people who were fully informed of the actual situation, then these people would have helped them that this is a fake news, or this is a true piece of information that they have gathered, or that has reached them. But without any such verification, they would just spread it. Aza'u bihi, the Quran says, they would just spread it without having it verified. And this is another plot of theirs that they would do. And then God says, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ لَاتَّبَعْتُمُ الشَّيْطَانَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And had God's grace and mercy not been upon you. So God is helping the believers here by telling them that in spite of these connivances and these conspiracies and these evil whisperings and rumors that they would spread, in spite of that, God helped you, and He did not let them get into you, and you were able to still survive. And had this not been the case, so as the Quran says, then Satan would have just engulfed you and finished you off. And then it is said, فَقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَا تُكَلِّفُ إِلَّا نَفْسَكَ وَحَرِّضِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَكُفَّ بَأْسَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَاللَّهُ أَشَدُّ بَأْسًا وَأَشَدُّ تَنْكِيلًا. Therefore, leave them a prophet and wage war for the cause of God. You are accountable for none but yourself. Now, this is something very important. La tukallafu illa nafsak, that you are accountable only for your own self. And all as for what you can do regarding other people is just to entice them, to urge them to war, because this is the time that has come over them and they have to fight the disbelievers. حَرِّضِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَسَى اللَّهُ يَكُفَّ بَأْسَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. And then it is said, it is quite probable that God will shatter the might of those who have disbelieved. God is the mightiest, and He shall mete out a terrible punishment to such disbelievers. Wallahu ashaddu ba'san wa ashaddu tankila. And then there, man yashfa' shafa'atan hasanatan yakun lahu nasibun minha, wa man yashfa' shafa'atan sayyi'atan yakun lahu kiflun minha. Wa kana Allahu ala kulli shay'in muqita. Their advice is to await jihad. Tell them, he who supports a good shall obtain a share from it, and he who supports an evil shall obtain a share from it. This is the verdict of God. This is the verdict of God, and God has power over all things. So as you can clearly see that these hypocrites who had infiltrated in the ranks of the Muslims, they wanted to also weaken their feelings and their valor and their, of course, at the same time, their enthusiasm for jihad. And they are being told that, remember, man yashfa' shafa'atan hasanatan yakul lahu nasibun minha, that he who supports a good will share a good from that, will get a share from that, and he who supports vice, he shall obtain a share from that, because if you are doing something wrong and cooperating with wrong, then you are part of that wrong as well. You are supporting that wrong as well. Wa kana Allahu ala kulli shay'in muqita. But whatever you do, you are not going to in any way dent the scheme of God, because God has power over all things. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ مُقِيتًا. وَإِذَا حُيِّيتُمْ بِتَحِيَّةٍ فَحَيُّوا بِأَحْسَنَ مِنْهَا أَوْ رُدُّوهَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ حَسِيبًا. Go out for war, and if salam is said to you by any person, you also reply by saying salam in a better way or in the same way. And do not commit excesses against anyone, because God surely will take account of everything. Allahu la ilaha illahu la yajma'annakum ila yawmil qiyamah la rayba fihi wa man asdaqu min Allahi haditha. There is no God but God. He will indeed take you to the day of judgment, take you all to the day of judgment, in the advent of which there is no doubt. And who can say a more truthful thing than God Himself? So basically, this verse which says وَإِذَا حُيِّيتُمْ بِتَحِيَّةٍ is referring to the fact that if other people come across you who say salam to you, then you should not in any way negate them. In fact, you should reply them by saying salam in a better way, because if you commit excesses against other people, this would not be true. And the context of this is that at times when people in the battlefield would come across other people or their enemies, and the enemy would say salam, then at times Muslims would not actually withhold themselves, and they would go and harm that person. But what the Quran is telling them, that if they say salam to you, don't think that this salam is being said to them just because a person wants to save his skin. He might want to even deceive you, but the fact is that you have not, you don't know from his heart what he actually is doing, whether he's saving his skin by saying salam or he has actually converted. So if in the battlefield, if this happens and you hear salam from even your enemy, then give him that refuge, because now he has said salam, even though you might doubt that he has said salam just to save his skin. But remember, this is something that this should not happen in any case. So since this war campaign was being launched to help the oppressed Muslims who were under the hold and sway of the rejectors, the attacking Muslims were directed to regard their saying salam to be a sign of their Islam. They were to accept the salutation and respond to it in a better manner, so that, later on they should investigate their faith, but at that time they should not in any way harm them. This is a very, very important directive, that if someone has come before you and he has asked for your refuge, even if to save his or her skin, then you should not do anything to harm that person. And then later, of course, you can investigate whether the person is true or not. So this is a very, very important directive. It shows how important it is that even when a person says something from his mouth, from outwardly even, then unless you know the reality, you should believe what is said on face value. And Allahu la ilaha illahu la yajma'annakum ila yawm al-qiyamah. Of course, this is a very, very repetitive topic and a very important message of the Quran is that He's going to take all of us to the day of judgment. I mean, there is no doubt about that day. It is going to come. And as the words say, وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حَدِيثًا, and who can say a more truthful thing than God Himself? So, وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حَدِيثًا. And then the next verse says, فَمَا لَكُمْ فِي الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِئَتَيْنِ وَاللَّهُ أَرْكَسَهُمْ بِمَا كَسَبُوا أَتُرِيدُونَ أَن تَهْدُوا مَنْ أَضَلَّ اللَّهُ وَمَنْ يُضْلِلِ اللَّهُ فَلَنْ تَجِدَ لَهُ سَبِيلًا. You do not know those who have turned back after embracing faith. Then what has come over you that you are divided into two groups regarding these hypocrites? God has turned them back because of what they did. Do you want to guide those whom God, according to His law, has led astray? Whereas those whom God leads astray, you cannot find a way for them. So the reason for this was that some Muslims some Muslims had familial ties and tribal relations with them, and thus they wanted that a soft attitude be adopted towards them. So they reckoned that if these people were not left alone and some relationship was maintained with them, they might slowly become Muslims. But the Quran has said, أَتُرِيدُونَ أَن تَهْدُوا مَنْ أَضَلَّ اللَّهُ. How can you guide people whom God has led astray because of their bad deeds? So you should not have a different opinion about these munafiqun, about these hypocrites. They are doomed, and this is now not the time to be soft to them. Remember, we have discussed this earlier on, that initially, because of the fact that a lot of people among the hypocrites, there was a chance for them to mend their state of affairs, to mend their ways, and to become sincere Muslims. So a lot of respite was given to them, and they were not taken to task immediately. But slowly and surely, as things moved forward and they saw that this is not happening, and some of these hypocrites have just infiltrated into the ranks of Muslims to cause this despair among them and to bring them down and to make them disillusioned with the Prophet. So this stern attitude was adopted, and this was something which God had signaled the Prophet, that now there's no more time to give them respite, no more time to be affectionate to them, and now they must be dealt with an iron hand. So then one of the things that they would have loved to do is mentioned, and that is وَدُّوا لَوْ تَكْفُرُونَ كَمَا كَفَرُوا فَتَكُونُونَ سَوَاءً. They want you to become disbelievers also the way they themselves are, so that you and they all become alike. So this is in the heart of their hearts, that they would like Muslims also, true Muslims, to become insincere also. And فَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا مِنْهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءَ حَتَّى يُهَاجِرُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Thus, do not befriend any of them until they come over after migrating for the cause of God. So basically, they were people who were living in different territories, and they did not want to take a step towards Islam by migrating to the central place. And then the Quran says that unless they migrate to that central place of Medina, do not entertain them. In fact, what it has said is, فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَخُذُوهُمْ وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ وَجَدتُّمُوهُم. Then if they desist from this, of course, it is said, حَتَّى يُهَاجِرُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, but then it says, فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا. Then if they desist from this, seize them. Which means, if they turn away, seize them and put them to death. And there seems to be a small error here in the translation. It says, then if they desist from this. If they desist from this wrong, from migrating, from the attitude of not migrating. So that is what is being said here, that they are being told to migrate, but instead of migrating, they do not obey this. فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا, they go back on this. Then the Quran says, فَخُذُوهُمْ وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ وَجَدتُّمُوهُم. Seize them and put them to death wherever you find them. فَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا مِنْهُمْ وَلِيًّا وَلَا نَصِيرًا. And make none of them your friend or helper. So such is the sternness which the Quran has gone, the extent to which the Quran has gone, that you have to seize them and put them to death, and of course never befriend them, because now they are causing nuisance, and this nuisance is spreading far and wide. But there is an exception to this, which is next mentioned, and that is إلا الذين يصلون إلى قوم بينكم وبينهم ميثاق أو جاءوكم حسرت صدورهم أو يقاتلوكم أو يقاتلوا قومهم ولو شاء الله لسلطهم عليكم فلقاتلوكم فأن اعتزلوكم فلم يقاتلوكم وألقوا إليكم السلم فما جعل الله لكم عليهم سبيلا. So, an exception, however, to this are those who have joined a nation with whom you have a pact, a covenant, a treaty. Similarly, they also are an exception who come over to you such that neither do they have the courage to fight against you nor against their own people. Had God pleased, He would have given them power over you, and they too would have waged war against you. Therefore, if they keep away from you and do not wage war and offer you peace, God does not permit you to take any action against them. So now this is a word of caution that is being sounded to the Muslims, and they are being told that regarding this directive of waging war against such hypocrites who are not migrating to the land of Islam, to the land of Medina, in spite of having the opportunity and the chance, and they are spreading this order also. So if they stick to it, adhere to it, then you have to kill them wherever they are. But there is an exception to this, and إِلَّا الَّذِينَ يَصِلُونَ إِلَىٰ قَوْمٍ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ مِيثَاقٌ, except if they have migrated from that place and gone to another place, and that place has a treaty with the Muslim Empire. In that case, you cannot harm them because now you are under a pact. And also there could be other people who don't have the courage to fight. As it says, they don't have the courage to fight you or their own nation. So they are like cowards. So had God pleased, He would have given them power over you, and they too would have waged war against you. So these are weak people. So if these weak people abstain because of any reason, then Muslims have not been given this power or this authority to go forward and attack them with an initiative. So basically it is said that if they keep away from you and do not wage war, in fact, not only they do not wage war, the Quran says, وَأَلْقَوْا إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَمَ, they in fact offer you peace. They say that we are at peace with you and we would not like to fight. So in such a case, the Quran says, فَمَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ عَلَيْهِمْ سَبِيلًا, and God does not permit you, He does not allow you to take any offensive action against such people who have withdrawn from this. So you see how important it is to understand that when the Almighty has given this authority to the Muslims to attack these people, then this is under a very strict condition. Once that condition is no longer there, people either go to some other place which has a pact or a treaty or a covenant with the Muslims or themselves, then of course they are under the obligation of honoring that pact. And similarly, if they come forward and say that we don't have the wherewithal or the courage to either fight with our own nation or with you, and we would like peace with you, so even in that case, the warring Muslim army is warned that they should not take any offensive action against them. So this discussion is still continuing from verse 91 onwards, but we still have the literal and idiomatic translation of today's lesson that we shall do. But first, if you have any questions, please raise them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The first question asks, hypocrites infiltrated within Muslims used to spread rumors and negative narratives, etc. at the time of the Prophet, but because this was tackled by God through Wahi, after the Prophet, like in our modern times, how can such negative narratives of hypocrites be prevented when there is no revelation from God?
By exactly saying this, that in the absence of any revelation, we cannot call any person a hypocrite. Hypocrisy is something which can only be diagnosed by Wahi, by God Himself. He did so in the prophetic era because He actually communicated to His Prophet that such and such a person is a hypocrite because he is different from inside and outwardly has a different behavior. So hypocrisy is something that can only be diagnosed through Wahi. Even a prophet himself is not in the authority or capacity to do that. He wants God's guidance. And this guidance comes in the form of Wahi or revelation. So once the institution of divine revelation has been terminated on Prophet Muhammad, we cannot regard any person a hypocrite in the sense they have been called here. But yes, in our general usage at times, when we use this word hypocrisy, we use it in a different sense, and that is when a person does not practice what he preaches. So we say, well, he's a hypocrite when he says something else and he does something else. So that is another usage. But the way hypocrites are being mentioned here in which they become culpable, in which they can be punished, in which they can be taken to task. So that is a category of hypocrites which only God knows.
Assalamu alaikum again, sir. Sir, my question is regarding with the ethics of war being used by Muslims in today's age, right? So I will just give you two examples to put things into context. Like recently, one country won by rebellion, and the leader was saying that we did not have any help whatsoever, and taking the name of Allah and saying that he did not had any help in gaining advances. But in fact, there are a lot of uh, news that he had help. Coming to the second example, um,
I didn't get the first example. How did he have help?
from different countries in gaining rebellion.
In doing what?
Syria example.
Okay, so I mean, you need to be more specific about the question.
Yes, sir. I'm coming on that point. So my question is like, does morality takes a backseat during wartime? Because what I was trying to say with this example is that he was clearly lying that he did not have any help, but in fact he had some help. So
I think you need to understand. Yeah, I do get your point. So you need to understand that the mechanics of war and these and the logistics also, they have a different, I would say, working in the prophetic times and a very different one in today's times. So in the prophetic times, people are exposed, fully exposed, which means that their evil is absolutely made evident, and either they mend their ways or they become evident in their, they become prominent that they are just evildoers. So in such a case, once this evil becomes prominent, once it becomes a self-admission also, it is then that God gives the prophet and his companions the authority to actually punish them. So this is a specific thing that happens only in the prophetic times. In today's times, this cannot be a norm in any case. I mean, you cannot in any way be aggressive. You cannot in any way diagnose that since such a person has done certain things, and we have done enough to preach him, so now he is culpable and now he is liable for punishment, which is of course our normal standard methodology that Muslims have adopted. This again, as I said, is a flawed methodology. You cannot expect God's help today the way it was promised to the Prophet and to his companions. For them, there was a different rule because they were directly doing something in the surveillance of the Almighty, and that something was the Prophet himself was present. He was explaining the truth from God through various means, and such a powerful personality he wielded that whatever truth he would convey in those times, of course it took about 10 or 12 years, it was meant to reach such a conclusion that ultimately, as the Quran says, kafaru min ba'di ma arafu, that they denied even after they knew what their denial was all about. They deliberately denied. So that is something which entails God's help, that once you fight the way He has told you to fight in the prophetic era. In today's era, whether we are doing something right or wrong, it has a lot of question marks. So we should not, always think that we are not being treated with God's help, or we are being deprived of that help. Or if, for example, as you've given this example, that a person is lying and that lying has made him actually possible to give him that person success. Even in spite of lying, he's succeeded. So you see, this is another mechanic that works in this post-prophetic era, in which evil is allowed to flourish, and that itself becomes a means of trial for the believers. But this does not happen in the time of the Prophet. In the times of the Prophet, evil is allowed to flourish initially, but later on it is necessarily subdued by the forces of good. And if you are able to understand and make this distinction between both these eras in this way, you will be able to come to this conclusion that anything that goes on today, even if it is done in a wrong way and success is still achieved, should not be considered to be a help of God in any way. It's more of a trial of God, because once God is going to catch that person, then we know what's going to happen to that person.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I had a question regarding the salam part. So that was only specific to the times of the Prophet, or does that also apply today?
Even today. This applies even today. And even in the times of the Prophet, and there is this incident that was reported to him that one of his companions actually ended up killing the person who had said salam, or he had professed actually faith. And because the companion thought that the person is just trying to save himself, so he just went on and killed him. And when the news reached the Prophet, he became furious. And the words that he used are, Hal shakakta an kalbihi, did you strip open his heart to see that he had actually done so just to save his skin? Were you as cognizant as God? So you see, as far as this outward behavior is concerned, even in the times of the Prophet, this is something which is not at all, something which sits good with God. So unless there is this, something which God conveys you regarding the internal situation of a person, you have to accept the person on his face value.
Not like in an extreme situation like the war, but in our day-to-day, there's sometimes some really creepy people that use
Right. Yeah, of course, that's not being talked about. That's something entirely different. You see, here what is being talked about is taking a life. So you cannot take a life simply because you think that a person is saying salam to you or maybe professing faith merely to save his skin. That's a different category of things. Today, of course, there are people who behave in a creepy way, as you said, and you have a different opinion about them. But you're not after their life, actually. All that you are after is that maybe you don't have good terms with them, or maybe you have restricted terms with them.
Thank you very much for that clarification. It was much needed. Noshad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Yes, Assalamualaikum, Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, isn't this practically a very difficult thing to do in a war, especially in those days? That when a person was face to face with his enemy, and the enemy suddenly sent salams, and if he stopped even for a second, that man would strike back. Practically, wouldn't that be a little difficult to observe?
You see, this is a specific situation in which the enemy is actually helpless, in which he has maybe just laid down the arms, he's just there, and he is under your knife, so to speak. And also in this particular case, the context is that the Muslim army was actually fighting that area in which there were people who were hiding amongst the hypocrites. And so they were given this warning, like a signal to them, that you might find your own people hiding amongst them. So if they say salam to you, don't immediately go after their lives, and give them some time and investigate later. So this gives us this impression that the person who was opposite, in the opposite sense, was not in a position to go after your life. He was helpless, or was rendered helpless in some form or the other. Otherwise, of course, you are right that this might be counterproductive.
But sir, if the other person is unarmed, then he wouldn't be considered to be an armed combatant, and even otherwise he would be.
So you see, you see, there are different scenarios that you can imagine. In spite of being a combatant, a person could have been unarmed because he might have finished his ammunition, or maybe he has been stripped off the sword, as we can see was the case in those times when the arm would be ripped off, and the right arm or the strong arm would no longer be useful for that person. So there could be scenarios in which, in spite of being a combatant, he was rendered a person who could not have fought for his life. So I think that these scenarios were the ones in which this directive has been given. Otherwise, if an armed enemy was facing you and you were clearly vulnerable yourself, it is against common sense to even think that you are going to spare someone who's going to knock you off in the next instant.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the topic-related questions.
Okay, so I'll not go and proceed forth with the literal translation because we've got 10 or 12 minutes left. So if you have any general questions, we can take them.
Okay, calling for general questions. Ammar Rasul, please go ahead.
Assalamu sir, my question is regarding this new piece of information that I have gotten from a lot of Western scholars talking about the huge number of deaths which are happening in Palestine, and a lot of Western scholars are pointing out that these people who are being killed actually have Jewish lineage, in their blood, because these are people whose families have been living in that land for hundreds of years or thousands of years, and they have over a period of time converted to Islam. So if you look at their bloodline, they are actually these people who are being killed and their families are being wiped out in this time. They are actually they belong to the families of the original Jewish settlers who lived in Palestine hundreds or thousands of years ago. And if we consider this to be correct, sir, my question is that these people who are being killed in the thousands today, can we, in a very strange way, say that this is actually Bani Israel which are being killed? It is just that Bani Israel have converted to Islam, because obviously Bani Israel is not a religion. Bani Israel is a people, they are a lineage.
So even if it is true, I mean, they no longer can be called the Israelites, because you see, Israelites, as far as their family is concerned or the origin is concerned, yes, we can call them, but for all practical purposes, they are now Muslims. So you just cannot, give a different label to them, except for the fact that they now have converted and become Muslims, and therefore they are being persecuted. Of course, that is something that's going on. One thing also that you might need to consider is that you see a lot of things that are happening in Gaza, in many other countries also, is portrayed by a media that's not, at all times reliable. So there is a lot of dust, a lot of smoke, and there are a lot of things that are still not very clear, or there could be a means of disinformation also. And amongst this whole, I would say, confusion, there is one thing that also needs to our attention, and that is that many times the Israelite authorities, the Israelite warring army, their own authorities, their own leadership has said this repeatedly, that when they are killing these non-combatants, or when they are being forced to kill these non-combatants, it is not out of their own pleasure or not out of their own intent. It is because these non-combatants are being used as a human shield, and the Hamas or other organizations have their headquarters, have their strongholds in some of the areas where this population is existing, especially in the case of some hospitals where it was alleged that in the basement of the hospital or in the lower story of that hospital, Hamas and other people had their own strongholds and strong rooms from which they were operating their own armies. So they were just using the hospital above as a human shield, and of course you can extend this to other areas as well. So I think whether this news is correct or not, that could be debatable, but just consider that if it is correct, then you have to understand that the onus of these casualties actually lies on the other side.
Sir, my question is with regard to the khutbah that is read out by the Imam during the Friday prayers, which is in Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
Is it an essential part of the Friday prayers? Because there are many Imams who say that if you miss the khutbah, then don't offer the prayers here. Go and find a mosque where the khutbah is not yet been said, because it is an essential part.
As far as this obligation is concerned, it is something that relates to a representative of the government. So if the ruler of the Muslims or their representatives, they have come to the mosque and they are giving their sermon, and it is here that it is an obligation for all of us to be present and listen to what is said to them, what they have to say. But remember, then that has to be said in the language of the people. So the Arabic khutbah that we normally hear in Pakistan, in other Muslim countries where Arabic is not their language, all that they do is they just repeat certain Arabic words every year, and that is circulated for many centuries. And these are the sermons that were given in the times of the Abbasids. So they have been learnt by heart and they have been transferred down to us. So the real thing is that if that whole scenario would have been revived, in which a Muslim representative of the government would be coming. So you see what was his obligation. So he had to give 2 khutbahs. In the first khutbah, he was given this lead that he must give some moral advice to the people who are present before him. So of course that moral advice can only make sense if we are able to understand the language. So that has to be in the language of the people. And the second khutbah, that was to be given were just prayers. They were just supplications in which Muslims were, they were actually resorted to, and they were actually inspired, and at the same time they were urged that these are some of the supplications which the Imam is making for their own well-being, and they just need to be part of that, of those supplications. So this is what this whole scenario is, that in the presence of a person who is giving that khutbah that is actually understandable is something that is an obligation for us. Today this is not happening anywhere, to the best of my knowledge, at least in our country.
Sir, but would you advocate these khutbahs being given in Urdu? I think Ghamidi Saab supports this view.
The khutbah, yes, of course. The khutbah which is given today is not given in Urdu. That's another different khutbah that is given before the Arabic khutbah. So we have now actually three khutbahs. One, the Urdu khutbah, and then we have two Arabic khutbahs. So his view is that there should be just two khutbahs. We don't need the Urdu one. The second and the third khutbah should be the Urdu khutbahs actually. So the first khutbah should be in Urdu, in which the person who is leading the prayer should give some moral advice, some ethical advice to people, and then sit down and then stand up again. And the next part, which should be just about some supplications, some du'as, some prayers that he should just make, and that is all.
Sir,
So
the Maulvis don't call the first khutbah, they call it a bayan, and they say only these two khutbahs are essential. But thank you very much, sir.
as I said, their essence would make any sense to us if we understand them. When people say that you have to be part of that khutbah, then how can we be part of that khutbah and then we regard it as people who have not done sufficient to attend that khutbah, because that khutbah is not even comprehensible to them.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Very much. The next question asks, when Hazrat Ali agreed on tahkeem with Muawiyah, then a faction amongst his army considered this to be against the Quranic direction of La hakama illallah. Does this mean that they were thinking that Ali was divinely appointed and can't be questioned and arbitrated?
No, not in any sense of the word, because that verse La hukma illallah is not referring to any such tahkeem that human beings do, because this happens every now and then. It happened in his time, it happens even today. When you appoint an arbitrator, appointing an arbitrator is nothing wrong. La hukma illallah is a verse which tells us that the directive of God prevails in this universe. It's referring to the physical laws, which means that the way the sun, the moon, the stars are being governed by him, that they don't make the slightest of any deviation. It actually tells us that the law of God, the physical law of God, is prevalent in this universe. So therefore human beings should also take cue from this, and they should also follow the law of God. So La hukma illallah does not refer to any tahkeem. Human arbitration has always happened, and ever since the time of Adam until today, human arbitration cannot be in any way thought that is actually replacing God's directive. So God's directive has a particular sphere, and that is what is the meaning of this verse. Actually, it is not by not understanding this verse that the Khawarij thought that he had done something wrong.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, if the husband and wife are separated because they're in different levels of Jannah, does that mean that they're unable to see each other? And then,
in the first place, I think they would marry or remarry, as the case is, if they are in the same levels. So why should even this thought arise? Why? It may well be that they are going to marry amongst their own sorts. If you're given this choice to marry someone, obviously that would be in the same level that you are in. If you're wishing to marry someone who is in a higher level, that is possible, I would say, due to God's mercy, but that is not a prerogative. That's not something that you have a right to. It might be a blessing of God that He might elevate you for that. But as I said, if the choice is between spouses of the same category, because that category would be a very, very vast and wide category, why in the first place would you go for someone who is not in that category?
I think they meant like they were married in this world, and then in Jannah they get separated because they're in different levels.
So in Jannah, if they get separated, the first question would be that does the wife want to come again and marry the husband, which is hardly the case in this world. And if that is something that's going to happen, then maybe God is going to be kind to them. We don't know.
Okay, thank you very much, Abdurrahman. Please go ahead.
Sir, my question is regarding just a few moments back, we were having a discussion about human shield. What if the people knowingly become human shield? Would they still be counted as non-combatant?
Not in that case. Not in that case. In that case, they have chosen to become part of the combatants in a different way.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because hospital authorities wouldn't be knowing that some entire
Of
department is
course.
sitting in their basement, and so they would be
Yes.
knowingly admitting them. So they are combatants, even if they are. So thank you so much, sir. Thanks for clarification.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all of the questions today. A superb session to end the last session of this year, inshallah. We'll see you again next year, and wish
Inshallah.
you all a very happy, joyous, and blessed 2025. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you very much.